Having super tight ankles is a malady that plagues loads of people. And I've worked with a lot of runners, a lot of weightlifters, and a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners who have a lot of ankle issues. And one of the biggest problems is that when it comes to practicing the fitness side of things, being able to squat effectively becomes severely limited. And this happens for a couple of reasons. Now, we have a load of different mobility drills that we can do to help to open up the ankle so that you can move your knee more. And you can have more ankle flexion, you can have more compression. So like when you're running, you ideally want to be able to compress through all this range of motion in terms of the arch, being able to compress like a spring, and your ankle being able to compress like a spring, and that distributes force outwards. And the more ankle range of motion, the more control you have over that range as you're running, that's significantly less impact force going straight up to your body, significantly less wear on your other joints upstream of your ankles, or your knees, hips, lower back, etc. Now, ankles are typically pretty obnoxious to really work with. I find that, I've been working with athletes for over 10 years now. Opening up the ankles is one of the most difficult things to do. We can get knees, hips, the spine, all aspects of the spine and the neck, shoulders, elbows, wrists. We can get all of that opened up really, really quickly, typically within about 30 minutes for most people with athletic injuries or just chronic stiffness. You can get full range of motion pretty dadgum fast. However, ankles tend to take a lot of time, reasons for that, but what we want to have is strategies for working with what you have in that moment while you're doing the mobility work to increase your ankle range of motion. Now, I want to preface this. I have basically full range of motion in my ankles, okay? So we're gonna go through what we need to understand when we're squatting while we have tight ankles, but this will still apply to me in the example I'm gonna show because of the equipment we're using. Now, I can do something like a pistol squat, flat-footed, balanced weight across my foot. I'm not biased on my heel, I'm not biased on the ball of my foot, it's right in the middle, right where I need it to be, and this is perfectly fine. And I can sit there, it's not really stressful or anything because I can get all the way down. So full ankle, knee, and hip range of motion down there at the bottom. It's easy. However, when I normally do a two-legged squat, when I go down, my heels are up by like 1.5 centimeters, right? Both of them. That means that my foundation, the part of my body that's holding me connected to the floor, is now weaker. It's now unstable. So if I was to be doing like weighted squats, 1, I do not want my stance to be this narrow. 2, I would never go down this low. That'd be extraordinarily weak. And long term, you're probably gonna have a lot of issues in your joints and have severely underdeveloped muscles relative to the amount of stress you have on the joints. Anyways, if we're working on the X3 bar and the ground plate, my stance becomes slightly restricted because I can't go out as wide as I want to. If I step off of this plate and now my feet are just outside of what it would be on the plate, easy. My feet are perfectly flat. There's no sense of like I'm falling backwards, because that's what happens when people are typically experiencing really tight ankles, is that they can squat to like here and they can't go any further. Why? Because if they do go any further, they have to fall backwards. And that's why if we get you to hold on to something in the front and you can lean back more effectively, then you can squat and it's fine, it's hunky-dory. Because we're making a compensation around the tight ankles. So now you can go further back, you can maintain flat-footedness, but that doesn't really translate to action. That doesn't really translate to the gym work. Alternately, you can just simply let your heels come on up. Easy. And if you're happy to have a little bit of a balancing act, that's fine. But this also doesn't really translate to the gym properly. You're not going to be squatting heavy like this. What we need to understand is where are your restrictions and where it's going to be strongest for creating a stable foundation and working within that range. And this is really helpful for the X3 bar. So we use this a lot for strengthening athletes when they're rehabbing an injury. So if you have a hurt ankle, hurt knee, hurt hip, hurt lower back, we are going to have a restricted range of motion in your squatting anyways. And this leads us to the next point. When we are squatting in competition, we have the standard of hip crease just below the knee, which would look about like this, okay? Why? There's nothing magical about that range of motion. It is a judging standard. It is so that a judge can determine that you've completed a rep. And people misinterpret that to being all squats have to be like that or otherwise they don't count. Garbage. That's an absolutely stupid understanding. And even Adrian Bosman, the head judge of CrossFit, will tell you that these are judging standards. They are not about optimal biomechanics or what is strongest, what is most powerful for the athlete, what is best for that specific athlete. Because if you imagine as well, athletes of different heights and body proportions will still have to go through different ranges of motion to hit that judging standard. It's not necessarily fair. So when I go through a squat, if I'm thinking, hey, we're going to do these X3 front squats, and front squats are a great demonstration for this because they demand your body is way more upright. Now, when I'm setting up for this, I'm going to be on the balls of my feet. I am not stable here. I do not want to be squatting this low. What I want to do, and this is what you need to do if you do have tight ankles, you need to establish where you create stability, where your foundation, your feet become strong and stable. So as I do this, I want to be balanced, but this is where the band is weakest. I want to come up until my feet are flat and I'm balanced, okay? So what I tell people in terms of feeling your body weight, you don't want to be on your heels. Do not squat on your heels. Do not squat on the balls of your feet, not with any amount of resistance on your body. Why? Because we're creating torque and slightly, gently, depending on how much resistance is on your body, shoving the knees outwards. Typically, I tell people, imagine knees over little toes and just getting that rotation. Why? That activates your hip rotators, that activates your arches, puts your knees into a much more stable and powerful position, as opposed to this. This is weak. This is very pathetic. This is unscrewing your ankles. It's unscrewing your knee, putting a lot of slack in your ACL and PCL, and it's creating hip impingement. It is not a good way to squat at all. You want to be slightly either neutral or, especially if you're doing a front squat, getting your knees out. That's another thing. If you're doing front squats or overhead squats, as I turn my knees out, the more I can do that, the more my hips come in, the easier it is to maintain more of a upright torso. Okay? Pro tip there. So what I need to do, remember perspective. What is the context of this video? You have really tight ankles. So how can I maximize my weightlifting or my resistance, my strength training, while my ankle's really tight, while I'm doing the mobility work to long-term make them more flexible? I come up in my squat. Now I've determined this is about where my feet become strong and stable. I can even kind of move around here because I'm not stable, and I can feel my body position. You really feel this in the thighs after just a few seconds. What I tell people on this is that if we imagine a triangle behind your big toe, your little toe, and your heel, you want your body weight right in the middle of that. So like right in front of the ankle, right through the arch. So as I get through there, or as I get out of the hole, I'm trying to feel for where my feet really become strong. I can create torque and shove my knees out, and then I can move through that range. So that range establishes my bottom position. If I go any lower, I become significantly weaker, and my feet or my ankles are gonna have to create a compensation. Don't worry about that. You go down until you feel like, hey, if I go any lower, I've used up my ankle range of motion. If I go any lower, I'm gonna have to create a compensation. I'm still squatting heavy. I'm still getting a lot of work on my muscles. The reps still count. I can still go to absolute failure with that. Plus, it's not gonna be anywhere near as much stress on your joints. If I go in with the mindset of, those squats that I just did there, they don't count because I didn't hit range. I didn't hit hip crease below the knee. I was actually hip crease just above the knee, wasn't I? You're never gonna get the work in. If you decide you have to go through that range, regardless of the maladies that you're dealing with, you're going to set yourself up for failure because you are going to be exacerbating those joint issues as you're going through. Does that make sense? You have really tight ankles. For now, you can work within that range of motion. Is it slightly restricted relative to what you need to be displaying during a competition when you're being judged? Yes, but even look at places like Westside Barbell. They do not do heavy ass squats all the way down, all the way up every single time. They do a ton of their training for squatting, doing things like box squats where they explicitly stop at about 90 degrees or slightly above. So the squat looks almost exactly like what I was doing there. And that comprises a huge chunk of the squat work. Why? Because you're much more powerful in that range, significantly less stress on the joints. This position coincidentally goes to about 90 degrees at the knee. Once I go below 90 degrees, the amount of torque that my knees have to create in order to get myself up out of that goes up exponentially. It's not linearly, it's not a little bit more stress, it is a lot more stress. So especially if you're dealing with joint issues, get around that by getting it out of your head that you have to be squatting through full range of motion. By the way, this would be a full range of motion for competition. That's not full range of motion. Full range of motion would be all the way down. So a little bit of a slight misnomer that context is very needed for. Does that make sense? Point is that when we have joint issues and we're trying to maximize the amount of muscle engagement and minimize the amount of stress on the joints, we can slightly restrict the range of motion in your squat to being slightly above the hips, slightly above the knees, and don't lock out at the very top.